Welcome to the Abundant Life Family Podcast. I'm Bill Hildebrand. We're helping to build families that last. And right now we're working on our 10th mile marker for families. And I want to open with this quote from Abraham Heschel. It tells us this: a test of people is how it behaves toward the old. It is easy to love children. Even tyrants and dictators make a point of being fond of children. But the affection and care for the old, the incurable, the helpless, are the true gold mines of a culture. So today we have with us Vickie Mears and Russell Fracassa, who will be representing parent care. How do we care for our parents as they enter that stage of life? Well, today we are glad to have with us Vickie Mears, and we do have a lawyer in the house. We have Russell Fracassa, and you guys are helping us with our 10th mile marker, parent care. And in this 10th mile marker, every one of these are to help us to plan ahead, to look ahead. How does this journey as a family look, and what do we need to do to get prepared? And so I'm glad that you guys can help us with this. I know that my wife and I are walking into this journey ourselves because we're like, wow, what in the world do we do? In fact, she's not here right now because of parent care. She's helping her mom with her final radiation treatment for cancer. So parent care. Vickie, first of all, tell us a little about yourself. You've been attending Abundant Life for a little while.
Well, I've been at Crossroads Hospice for 19 years, and I'm in bereavement care. And in the hospice setting, that means after the loss, after the death, then we follow up with families for at least a year if they want that.
Okay.
And we provide education, support groups. If there are indicators, we make referrals because sometimes people need a little more care. They need a therapist. And so those are parts of what we do.
How did you get into this?
Well, it was a midlife career change, and I went into social work. I found hospice, and I was working as a social worker in long-term care, which I love the setting, actually. But I observed hospice and the beautiful work they were doing, and I was drawn there. And so I've been there since doing grief education, grief support, and that's just where I feel like God planted me.
Wow. Well, we'll come back to you in just a moment, but Rusty, tell us a little about yourself as well.
I remember I was an accountant years ago, and I was very unhappy, and my wife asked me, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I'm not really sure, but I want to sit at the kitchen table with Ma and Pa and just be able to touch the people that I'm working with. And it's kind of funny, I, like a lot of people that go to law school, I didn't know what I wanted to do in early life. So I thought, go to law school. And so I got out, and I was an estate planning attorney, and most of my clients started, increasingly, they were just older people. And then that's the only people I was getting as clients were older people. So I just was dealing with more elder law type stuff before it was actually a phrase that was coined. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years now. A little bit of a break in the middle, but for the most part, that's it.
Now you've got kids of your own. 4 kids, you said?
We had 4 kids. 1 passed away. We have 10 grandkids, 2 great-grandkids. We've raised grandkids, yeah.
So you're not only a lawyer, but you're a dad, and you're an estate planner. That's awesome. As I walk through this journey myself, what advice can you give me, both of you?
Well, this is another season of life, and you have walked through different seasons as a parent when your children were developing. and they became teenagers, and then they became adults and were parenting. And in each phase, you had to switch how you were interacting with them.
That's right.
And in each phase, like in any relationship, beginning with respect is very significant. Beginning with listening, because they are going through a lot of change. And so understanding from their perspective what that's like, going in, looking for common ground and being a teammate instead of coming in with a lot of advice.
That was really good. I love those different stages, and that we have to adjust for each one of those and see how that adjustment looks. So how does it look moving from being somebody who's always been cared for, even with my parents being grandparents, helping with our kids? You know, my parents, we have 4 boys, and all of them were involved in sports. We had 4 kids going 4 different directions, one to this football team, one to that football team. We had to get grandparents involved in taking them to practices and doing different things. So yeah, they've helped care for us even as parents. But now, yeah, we kind of have a role reversal a little bit, and we have to make some adjustments. But you said keeping that communication open, respect is important, that they respect you, but you respect them, so it's mutual.
Asking questions instead of declaring statements. And with each life stage, there is loss. So loss is a result of change, and then grief is a reaction to loss. So as we age, we're going through a lot of loss and change. And so there are a lot of feelings, and they're not always recognized as what they are. This is grief. How do we respond to grief? You know, gently.
That's right. And moving from one stage to another, helping them to do that. What are some ways that I can continue to help my parents?
I think that focusing on relationship development, just like you did when your kid went to college, you know, you did a pre-plan. It didn't mean that you told your child everything, right?
Right.
So with your parents, you might have a pre-plan of a concept, but you're not going to go and lay out the playbook to them like, this is what we're doing, right?
Right.
So you think about things in advance in ways that you can approach them. Staying, again, a great listener, having empathy, building new memories. So one way is including fun with them in the relationship. Life review as we age and look back. Did my life matter? And having evidence for that. So there are resources like legacy questions, and those are things you can share. You could give them the questions, or it can just be sort of natural. And you will learn things about them. They will remember things about who they have been, their strengths and skills, as some of those are fading.
So what are a few examples of legacy questions?
Well, it can be simple as, where did you go to grade school? Who was your favorite teacher? What kind of things did you enjoy growing up? What was most fun for you? You know, and it might have been a kick the can kind of era, right?
Yeah.
So, but engaging in things, they'll remember things that they never shared with you before, that now you can share together. But the other piece of it that we all need as human beings is what we call anticipatory joy, things to look forward to. So in the elder stage of life, maintaining purpose and meaning, and that often includes giving to someone. So volunteering, and it can be an elder making a phone call to another person, and that comes through senior centers or different community organizations to connect. It could be writing cards to people in the hospital or to the pastors saying, hey, I appreciate you. Things like that, encouraging things, maybe through Samaritan's Purse and disasters, people who are going through hard times. Engaging around meaning and purpose is very powerful and important for all of us, actually.
Is depression a big factor with parent care, with our parents as they age?
It can be. It depends. Again, do they have socialization? How much isolation is involved? So some of that can be organic, chemically changes happening in the body, but some of it's about relationships and socialization again, and fun. Everybody needs some fun, right?
That's right. Even lawyers need fun, right? So what's something that you guys do, not together obviously, we just met, but what is something that you do, Vickie, for fun?
Yeah, well, I have a group of friends, and so we are creative. We get together and we just decide on what we're going to do. It might be a trip or a day trip. It might be trying something new to a different kind of restaurant. So it's creative, and it's also about the same idea that I was telling you earlier, collaboration. So it's not just one person making the decision. And that's the way, as we're engaging with older parents, we want to engage them in the ideas and autonomy, choice, when they're giving up perhaps first night driving and then maybe some day driving, and then that big fight over the license sometimes. So, yeah.
Rusty, when we have to, how do we plan for this? How do we plan for parent care?
Well, one of the things that Vickie talked about early on, I think maybe even before we got on camera, was, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it made me think of the business concept that you never begin anything without the end in mind. And so, and you never do know. People ask me all the time, they'll stop me in the hall and they'll say, oh, I need to get my will done. When should I make an appointment? And I'll say, well, before you die. And it's kind of the same way here. The most difficult thing, and we're in the midst of it right now with my father and my wife's mother, that same stage that you're in caring for elderly people. And I actually have people that I care for. I'm their power of attorney. So it's, first of all, you got to make that transition. When am I going to stop being the one the decisions are made for, to being the one to making the decisions? And then, of course, with a lot of things that Vickie said about the respect, doing that and keeping the lines open. I try to model that in my meetings with clients. Just this morning when I was at an appointment, I talked with the dad. The dad wasn't hitting on all cylinders, but that's who my client is, and that's who I focused on, and I made eye contact with him. And I would ask him the questions, even though typically we really knew I was talking to the son, but it was him where he felt engaged, and it's his life. So what you do in that respect is, the first thing I always do is I say, well, I don't know the future. That's my whole thing about, well, just come in before you die for a will. Well, come in for your power of attorneys before you need them. Because if you don't have power of attorneys, there's only one option when a person becomes incapacitated to make decisions on their behalf, and that's a guardianship through the probate court. A lot more expense, a lot more trouble. I like it as a lawyer because I make a lot more money, but the families, if we're looking out for other people and how the family's going to work, you don't want the court involved. You don't want to have to overspend. So you get the power of attorneys first before you need
So
it.
how does a power of attorney help?
Well, what happens is, for example, you have decisions that you get to make. You get to make decisions about your health care. You go to the doctor, you decide if you're going to take the medication or not, or which one, or when you're going to have surgery. Well, if you don't have the ability to process the information coming in and project it or make those decisions, this person can speak on your behalf and step in your place. Well, there's two things. There's your body and there's everything other than your body. And that's very important. It's general power of attorney is what it's called. You have the healthcare power of attorney and you have a general power of attorney. And a lot of people don't think about it because, like the guy that came in today, he's living in his son's house. He has one bank account. He doesn't even have a car anymore. He's been taken advantage of financially, and so therefore he's down to nothing at the end of life. But yet still, if the insurance company doesn't want to pay an insurance bill, well, that's the general power of attorney that is the one that has the authority to talk to the insurance company. In this case, there was a problem at the bank because this person taking advantage was accessing the account. Well, the bank, if the son hadn't had the power of attorney, the bank would only talk to the father. Well, he's the one that got himself exposed. Yeah, or if you have utilities, people think, oh, I've been married for so long. If I can't deal with the utility company, my wife can. No, if those utilities are in your name, good luck somebody else trying to deal with the company. So there's a lot involved. But what gives you that the foundation, the first thing you have to do any of that are powers of attorney. Mm-hmm. So you only have two options when people become incapacitated. One is you've done a durable power of attorney in advance. And the other one is if you haven't, you're incapacitated, then there has to be a guardianship through the probate court.
You talked also about the importance of, and I think this question goes for both of you guys, but we need to step in and watch the care taken of our parents. Perhaps there's a nurse or a doctor that's caring for them. How do we know when to start getting involved, and how involved do we get?
Well, I have an initial thought, and then I'll turn it to the attorney because this is my understanding about the law, is the law gives the adults the right to make bad decisions. Okay. So until someone is deemed incapacitated, which is a big process, then your parents have the right to stay in their homes and be unsafe until they are willing to do something differently. And so that's something to keep in mind, which is, again, why the respect factor and the collaboration is so important. And if you do not have a power of attorney, then the medical community cannot share any information due to HIPAA. And so having those types of documents in advance when there is not the stress or the catastrophic issue happening, that is the ideal way. And we know that from the hospice experience. There are people on hospice, which means if a doctor feels you're going to live 6 months or less, then that's when a referral can be made. But there are people on hospice who will not have these discussions. They are terminal, they are on hospice, and they will say, your mom will take care of that. Your mom knows. And so it's a gift in advance to do these things for your children, for your spouse.
We had been living out of the country, and we came back for a visit we were missionaries living in Africa, and our family came back for a short home assignment, and within the first month, my mom, I knew she had some health issues, didn't know what. She was young, she was 68, but at one point, I hadn't heard from her for several days. A neighbor asked to visit, hey, would you mind, she's not getting her mail, she didn't put her trash out. Do you mind if I step in the back door and check? And this neighbor actually had access. So I said, sure. I was walking into a meeting, and I didn't think a lot about it. But then I thought, oh, wait a minute. You're going to need to call 911 no matter what. if my mom, anyway, she ended up finding my mom collapsed on her bed, and she had probably been that way for a couple of days. She was still alive, but barely. And so they were able to rush her to the hospital. The ambulance came and so on. And we were out of state at the time, so I drove back to the Kansas City area, and my mom's last week of her life was in ICU, and she at least got to the point where she could respond. Yes, no, she had a breathing tube, but she couldn't talk, obviously, with all that. I recognized the need for a power of attorney. The doctors were able to ask me questions. A lot of them I didn't know because I hadn't been around my mom, but I did know she didn't go to a doctor. She didn't want it that way. So she wouldn't have done anything different, and I don't have any guilt, but yet I wish I had been there a little earlier. I wish she hadn't had to lay there like that, So there's things that we look at and we realize, okay, if I'd have thought this through earlier, would I have done it differently? And that's what you guys are all about. Think it through now. Walk through this before you're making or having regrets.
Well, you mentioned something. I seem to repeat myself all the time because, like I told some people earlier today, you are special, but your story's not unique. So I repeat the same thing often. But Vickie is 100% correct, and I say it all the time. Your mom has the right, or father has the right to make bad decisions. I exercise that right liberally. And now you ask the question, when? And so when people are sitting in my chair, if a child is, and they're asking those questions, I'll always say, well, now's the right time. And they'll say, well, how do you know that? I haven't talked much. And I'll say, because you're in that chair. Nobody sits in that chair unless something has happened. So if the parent is not compliant, if they're not understanding or sticking their head in the sand like we've talked about, they do get to make their own decisions. But like I always say, they will make the decision easy for you. Something will occur. So had you tried to get involved with your mother in advance, I'm sure from what you said, it would have been met with some resistance.
Absolutely.
Well, your mom made the decision easy for you, didn't she?
She did.
It was a no-brainer when you became involved. Everybody gets to do that. Unfortunately, others may be injured by that, though. So, for example, you talked about taking away the keys. Well, there's clients I have all the time that I always tease them, and I'll say, well, let me give you my cell number. And when you think that you want to go out and drive, call me, because I have a lot of kids and grandkids on the roads you're driving on. And from the way I've seen you walk in, it scares me. Now, nobody likes lawyers. I'm a male, I'm a lawyer, and I'm not the one that has to worry about them rejecting me. So I can say those things to them. That's the one thing I think we have to keep in mind. It is offensive sometimes. I get offended in a personal matter when there's somebody that I know that is driving that honestly I believe deep down should not be driving. Yeah. What is going to happen if I'm driving, say, a grandchild and I make a mistake? Well, yes, this person I'm referring to, they can drive very well as long as nobody else is on the road. They are very careful. But can they react to my mistake? So my child has to die or get injured or something has to happen? No. So I think that we do have to, with respect, take over that position. And when you start thinking about it is probably, again, with the respect and the communication, start down that road. Because if you just walk in and say, I'm taking the keys, that's far different than saying, well, we need to talk about what's going to happen when maybe you don't feel comfortable driving. Maybe a year before that happens. Yeah, so the power of attorneys, though, are important. But I did want to mention, though, that power of attorneys are not the end all. Simply because the negative side of a power of attorney is they can always be revoked and they can always be overridden by the parent. Mm-hmm. So they may become non-compliant. So a lot of diseases that's one of the side effects is anger issues, or they forget that they complied before. And so they revoke or they override it. And then you have to go do a guardianship. So we do guardianships for people with power of attorneys. We do a number of those every year just because you try it with the power of attorney, but if you can't do it, then a guardianship is where you legally have the authority over them. The power of attorney just allows you to come alongside.
One last question that I can think of is, are there lower income options? So often when you're talking about your parents needing community, needing a safe place that they can live, that maybe doesn't have the stairs to navigate and whatever, whether it's assisted living or full-time care or whatever, are there some options that are maybe on the less expensive side? It seems like everything is so pricey.
I'm glad it's the last question because it's a short answer, unless you have something, is that no, it's very difficult. Okay. Yeah, in Missouri, there's fewer options. In Kansas, there's this Medicaid benefit called Home and Community-Based Services, or waivers, you may hear them referred to. And the assisted living facilities in Kansas, there are a majority of those will accept that. In Missouri, there's a few that I know, and the ones I know, I personally would never recommend just because the benefit is so minimal in Missouri. But you do have options such as, I know I was on the board of directors for a senior apartment complex, and it was income-based. And there's many of those around. But honestly, there is a place in the middle between independent living and, say, I'll generically say the nursing home, that is difficult, very difficult. Not many options at all. And that's where family is important. I do also want to reiterate, though, that the nursing home is not something to necessarily be afraid of. We talked, I think one of the things we had talked about in preparation for today was caring for the caretaker. And there's a lot of guilt associated with not caring for a parent in the home, but most people have no concept of how difficult that is emotionally, financially, physically, to take care of just having another person in the home, much less take care of them. I always try to talk to people about being a little more open-minded to a nursing home. People ask me all the time, what's the best nursing home? And I'll say the one you can get to the easiest, because you will. And your parents' care will be directly related to the frequency of your visits. And you're welcome, and I say this with spouses all the time. Of course, it's easy for me to say to somebody else's spouse when it comes my turn. I don't know how well I'll accept it. But you can go in the morning and help your spouse get out of bed, get breakfast, get dressed. You can eat lunch with them. You can help put them in bed at night. Then if they fall, there's somebody there to help. If you need to go to the doctor or to the grocery store, they're safe, they're cared for. There's socialization, there's proper nutrition, there's medication scheduling. There's so many benefits, but just don't be afraid of it. I'm not advocating it. Yeah. I'm just advocating be open-minded to all the possibilities.
That's good advice. And I appreciate you guys. There are so many things to discuss, and we just barely opened the topic.
And if I may just add a resource that Eldercare Locator is one resource, the AAA, Area Agency on Aging.
So AAA like the car insurance?
No, but just it's a good way to remember it.
Okay.
Each county has an Area Agency on Aging that has services and support for the older adult, and you can contact them. You can go online. In Kansas City, it's Mid-America Regional Council. Calling 211, it's an informational line that can get some resources around different things. So there are resources available, information available to everyone. It's a matter of knowing that they're out there. Certainly the middle is the hardest gap, but not impossible. And again, with those beginning conversations and coming in with a question or saying an I statement, Mom, I feel worried about you in this house alone with all these stairs. You know, a statement of concern can sometimes begin the conversation.
That's really good too. Great resources that you named off, and I'll try to make sure that we get some of those posted as well.
Sure.
But that's been great.
And palliative care, so just hospice versus palliative.
Okay.
Hospice is only if you have a terminal diagnosis. Palliative, you can have any diagnosis and continue getting aggressive treatment, and you will get a nurse practitioner who will come to you wherever you reside. And so that is a beautiful benefit for these gap areas. And hospice, of course, you'll get a whole team, a nurse, social worker, chaplain, and then bereavement, a volunteer, lots of programs. But if you don't qualify there, then looking into palliative care can be very beneficial.
Thank you very much, you guys. I appreciate you being with us. Can I close this in prayer? So, Lord, thank you so much for an opportunity to sit down and talk about a very difficult subject. When this comes up in our lives, parent care. And I just thank you for Vickie and for Rusty and their expertise, their fields that they've spent many, many years in. And I just pray that, number one, you would continue to bless them in their efforts, but thank you for their wisdom that they've shared with us as well. So Jesus, thank you for caring for us and help us to care for those that we love the most. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Abundant Life Family Podcast. If you found this helpful for your family, hit like and subscribe below. And feel free to drop a comment or question below. To learn more about the Abundant Life Family Ministry and the 10-mile markers to help you win at building families that last, go to our website at livingproof.co/family.